Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Shared Value Initiative Speaker Series. I'm Bobby Silton, Managing Director of the Shared Value Initiative. We're a global platform for leaders seeking to address societal issues through business solutions. We're one of 3 initiatives housed within FSG, which is a not-for-profit social impact consulting firm, and we're seeking to drive equitable systems change. So this is the last session of our 2022 speaker series, and today's discussion is focused on climate change and people, working toward environmental goals with just transitions. So this is a really timely topic, given that last month COP27 was held. This year's UN Climate Summit in Egypt brought together nearly 200 nations to discuss and negotiate over the future of global action on climate change. One of the key achievements out of COP27 was the agreement to establish a fund to address loss and damage and compensate climate change victims in the developing world. However, we know there are still many questions and details that remain to be sorted out, yet this is progress. The private sector plays a crucial role in facilitating the shift toward a low carbon world, but we must work in partnership with communities, workers, policymakers to ensure that no one is left behind. For our session today, we're going to hear from leaders from CEMEX, a global construction and materials company headquartered in Mexico, and Nestlé, the world's largest food company headquartered in Switzerland. They will be in conversation with a senior editor from Fortune. From this session, we hope that you will learn what 2 very different companies in 2 very different industries are doing to address climate change. And we hope the range of ideas will help inspire all of you in our audience. Secondly, we're going to learn about how their climate goals and their social impact goals actually intersect, and the role that stakeholders play in helping to shape those efforts. And finally, we're going to learn a little bit about the leadership required to shift mindsets and also to enable the conditions that really create real and lasting change. So before I introduce our speakers, I just want to take a moment to thank the sponsors of the Shared Value Initiative Speaker Series. We couldn't do this without them. Discovery, Enel, Merck, Truist, Walmart, Abbott, Sanofi, and 3M. Through their generous support, we're able to make this programming available to the general public free of charge. We greatly appreciate the support of our sponsors, but importantly, we appreciate their commitment to advancing more equitable outcomes for society. So now let me introduce our speakers for today. First, we have Beatriz Tumoine. She is the Global Social Impact Director at CEMEX. And prior to this role, she held various roles in the company in HR, and she really brings that global people perspective to her current role. Leanne Geale is Executive Vice President, General Counsel of Corporate Governance and Compliance at Nestlé. And in this role, she is transforming the legal and compliance function to enable the company to meet business and ESG goals. Beatriz and Leanne will be in conversation with Matt Heimer, and Matt Heimer is an executive editor for features at Fortune and the lead editor of the Change the World list. I should note that both Nestlé and CEMEX have been on the Change the World list in the past years for their innovative efforts and their social impact. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation with these very thoughtful leaders. So Matt, I'm going to hand it over to you, and I'll be back to wrap up.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Bobby. And on behalf of Fortune, thanks so much to Shared Value Initiative for being such a great partner with us on the Change the World list. We launched that in 2015. We're still going strong, 7 years and counting later, and we're so grateful for the chance to work with you. And Beatriz and Leanne, thank you so much for sharing your time and your insights today. I'm really looking forward to our conversation. I was thinking about how when I was younger, conversations about climate action often focused on animals other than the human animal, save the whales, save the forests, give a hoot and don't pollute. all those factors are so important, of course, and remain important, but we've since come to learn that really the climate crisis is an existential one for humanity. And, as Bobby stressed earlier, and as her colleagues wrote when we launched the Change the World list in October, there's now a tremendous overlap and a tremendous need for integration between a company's climate action policies and its social impact thinking. And obviously, both CEMEX and Nestlé are among the companies that are really taking the lead in addressing those issues in an integrated way. So we're so thrilled to have you here to talk about that. Before we dig into that intersection that Bobby described, I wanted to give a chance to take a step back and learn more about what your respective companies are doing. Obviously, CEMEX and Nestlé are in very different fields, but of course, your actions are being shaped by some shared values too. So I thought I'd go ahead and start with Beatriz and with CEMEX. At a high level for CEMEX, what are your company's climate goals?
Thank you, Matt, for that. And thank you, everyone, for being here and sharing with us. So, Matt, just to give our audience a little context, because some of them may not be familiar with our company,
Sure.
CEMEX is a 110-year-old company with its origin in Mexico, as Bobby mentioned. And today we're present in over 50 countries around the world. We are really committed to building a better future by delivering building solutions to our over 100,000 customers over our operations. Our commitment to the environment, and it's funny that you mentioned, is as old as our company, but we were focused on stuff like you just said. We have a huge reserve where we have bisons, and we are very conscious of the impact our company has on the environment. So we have been very careful with quarry recovery and with pollution. But more recently, the urgency to commit to accelerating the initiatives we have towards mitigating climate change have really taken hold of the company. We have really turned our head and have done some very aggressive 2030 goals. Fernando Gonzalez, our CEO, just recently at COP, shared our commitment to the 1.5 degree scenario. Mm-hmm. And he is definitely very, very, very committed to us reaching a net zero CO2 scenario by 2030. So we are really working hard on that. Mm-hmm. The core elements of our climate strategy are decarbonizing our operations. We're working very hard at that. The technical guys are doing great work in that aspect. And also our research and development teams are really focused on developing sustainable products and solutions for our customers. And our business in general is focusing on developing a circular economy. All of this is being done through innovation and partnerships. We have been very focused on understanding first that we alone cannot solve for this problem, that we need to bring others on board, and that we need to be innovative. Our industry is so old, and it has so much space, for innovation from the technical side and from other aspects of innovation. So we're really working on that.
Yeah. And Beatriz, if I may interject for just a second for folks in the audience who might not know, of course, building materials, concrete and cement in particular, and construction in general have a fairly large carbon footprint. So there's not only room for innovation, but a lot of room for impact in bringing down the.
Absolutely. We are, as we have, as I said, as we've turned all our heads into this commitment towards climate change, we have realized that there is huge potential for accelerating our path, because it's been, this 100 years that we have been producing cement in the very same way, with some adjustments. But I think that there is really an enormous space for us to innovate and make sure that we develop lower carbon content products, and our teams are doing great jobs on that. The other piece and final of our climate strategy is advocating and promoting a green economy. As I've said, we operate in different countries around the world, so we can see the best practices that are happening in Europe that is being pressured by the legislation. But then we operate in countries where that is not true, and we are committed to working as one CEMEX up to our highest standard. So we are really working with governments, with academia, and with our people to make sure that we bring everyone on board our journey towards a green economy.
Thanks, Beatriz. Briefly, and forgive me for making it brief, but could you briefly also let us know what CEMEX's social impact goals are?
Absolutely. So we see social impact at CEMEX, Matt, as an opportunity to amplify our strategy. We really want our leaders and work for our leaders to think about social impact as an and to our strategy, because in a very natural way, we serve society. We help shape the built environment, and we work very hard on making sure that our customers and the final the people that actually benefit from our products through our distributors can develop livable housing and resilient structures and others. So we have a very natural connection to social, but we also are very committed to working in 4 pillars to make sure that we are developing the right skill set for people to become employable, particularly in economies where we really see a gap in the opportunity for people to access education and jobs. So people, employability, and education is one of our pillars for work in social impact. The second one is enabling a circular economy. We are doing a lot of work there on entrepreneurship. Small entrepreneurs that can actually come and join our supply chain, or in some ways help us recycle materials and waste so that the company can bring it up into its processes. We focus also on livable housing, as I just said. One of our flagship initiatives, and we actually have some others, but one of our flagship initiatives on livable housing is Patrimonio Hoy, a financing scheme that enables people to make small, work in their homes to improve the quality of them. We give them technical advice along with the financing and deliver products to them. So that livable housing element for us is really important, because we want individuals and large also scale builders to be able and empowered not to build and have quality structures to protect them. This becomes very relevant as we work on adaptation to climate change, and we see the impact of huge weather disasters in some of our operations. So this is very relevant for us. And then finally, the final pillar of our work are cities. So we have been very committed as a company from a strategy standpoint to developing solutions for the problems of megacities: trash, water, mobility for all. And from a social impact standpoint, what we do is look at what our people are doing from a business standpoint and extend the reach of their initiatives. So what we are doing for cities, for example, is focusing on green spaces and, of course, mobility, making sure we have a lot of heavy trucks sometimes running through the city. So we make sure that people are trained to be safe drivers, but also to be safe on the streets. So those would be our 4 pillars: people, the economy, enabling a circular economy, livable housing, and cities.
Thanks, Beatriz. I really appreciate it. Leanne, I want to come back to Nestlé now and ask the same questions. Here, we heard from Beatriz you can see some of the intersections between both the importance of innovations and the broad accessibility of those innovations as being a place where climate and social impact meet. So I want to put a pin in that idea for later. But Leanne, I wanted to turn the floor over to you and talk about Nestlé's goals. Starting out at a high level, can you talk about Nestlé's climate goals?
Yes, thank you very much, Matt, and really happy to be here and have such a great audience. So climate change is one of society's biggest challenges, and it's also one of the greatest risks to our food production system. And so in December 2020, we were one of the first food companies to issue a climate roadmap. And this highlights the efforts that we're going to take to reach our net zero greenhouse gas emissions targets. Our ambition is to reach, net zero by 2050 at the latest, with an interim goal of having our emissions by 2030. And we're on track to do this. In fact, we believe we've already passed our peak carbon. That was in 2019, and we continue to see that drop even though we continue to grow as an organization. And in fact, last year, we reduced by 4 million tons of GHG emissions. Now, 2/3 of our GHG emissions comes from sourcing of our raw materials, hence leading back to our farmers and the food systems.
Sure.
And therefore, farmers are really at the center of our approach to address greenhouse gas emissions. So we want support solutions that work for the farmers and also then reflect the type of food that they're growing. So there, we're planning to invest approximately 1.2 billion Swiss francs by 2025 to accelerate what we call a regenerative food systems, one that enables us to protect, renew, and restore the environment, at the same time improve the livelihood of the livelihoods of farmers and the well-being of the communities in which they operate. We want communities and the farmers to be successful not only now, but for the future, hence our focus on the farmers. And to support this transition to regenerative farming, what we do is provide incentives to the farmers, rewards for good practices, such as agricultural, agroforestry practices, and also we provide technical and scientific guidance. And the activities and programs that we implement, we engage with the farmers, we engage with the stakeholders, and really do a holistic and integrated approach to managing greenhouse gas emissions at the farm level to, therefore reduce our emissions, but also make the future much more sustainable and resilient for the farmers upon whom all of us rely ultimately for our food production.
Sure. And transitioning into the social impact idea, it seems like those relationships with the farmers, the correlation between the social impact and the climate impact is pretty direct. Are there ways in which the Nestlé social impact mission kind of reaches more broadly, in its services to farmers? I mean, beyond sort of the climate focus.
Yeah, so just if I could just say a few words on the climate focus, because our climate roadmap really has people at the center of it, including farmers. And so we really need to advance these regenerative food systems at scale, right from the farmer level, but moving up the chain as well. And human rights then are also integrally linked with farmers, but also through our value chain, moving up through to manufacture, production, distribution, and ultimately to the consumer. So we need to build that foundation, starting with for farmers, and then bring it through the whole way, again, to make that resilient and protect and enhance the future for all of us. So we've trained almost all of our employees on human rights to date. The last count, I think we trained over 214,000 employees on human rights. And we've been advocating for higher standards on a global and regional level for human rights and environmental due diligence. And I know we're going to come on the intersection to that as well. Sure. Yes, what we do beyond GHG, well, we also focus on different programs advancing those human rights. For example, we introduced something called a Child Labor Monitoring and Reporting System, CLMRS. We were the first, we invented it, and it's now an industry standard to monitor for that risk of child labor and address the risks where we find them. Last year, we introduced a human rights framework and roadmap that, again, puts people at first, right at the center of it, and it addresses human rights from raw material sourcing all the way to the consumer. And in fact, we'll be issuing shortly our action plans on our 10 salient issue for a human rights perspective. And these address everything from diversity and inclusion to living wage, to rights to water and sanitation, of course, child labor, and data privacy as examples.
That's great. Thank you very much. A question that I have for both of you before we dig a little bit deeper into some of the specific initiatives. We've talked before, Fortune and SVI and other conversations and other contexts about the message that a company sends with its mission statement. And I'm curious to know, I'll start with you, Leanne. Does Nestlé's mission statement dig explicitly into climate change or social impact or both?
Yes, so our ambition is really to advance regenerative food systems at scale. So that touches both the climate aspect, but also, of course, the food and the human aspect, and brings all of that together. So we see our net zero roadmap and our human rights roadmap really coming together and intersecting in the food system. And so as a part of our generation regeneration agenda, we're working with all of our food system partners to advance those. We actually have a network of over 500,000 farmers and source from over 5 million farmers around the world as part of this. Again, that regeneration has to be at the center of that food system. We've initiated some new programs, such as an income accelerator program, where we provide incentives, as I mentioned, to the farmers. We have a Nescafé 2030 plan for our coffee farmers, which is also focused not only on the farmers and regenerative food practices, but also on reducing GHG emissions. And it's all to address both the social and economic impact of climate change and human rights issues. And then to succeed, we need to be just. We need to have a just transition where no one is left behind. And that's really a bold vision, but I think we can achieve that not alone, but collectively with industry partners, multi-stakeholder organizations, our competitors, everyone leaning in on this. And we really, again, we believe need to put people at the center. The people are the ones that make the world work. So it's really important for us to do that.
I love the way I'm really intrigued by the way that regeneration and regenerative practices, yes, that has a specific meaning, but it also has a kind of metaphorical quality about, starting over, bringing things back together, integrating things in a way that we often have missed in the past. Beatriz, let's talk about if we could briefly talk about CEMEX's mission statement. How does your company's mission statement explicitly mention climate and social impact goals?
Yes, so we do explicitly mention our commitment to delivering sustainable products and solutions. As you know, mission statements are short, so we sometimes need to really focus on delivering all the value to society. But as Leanne has been sharing, and I'm so happy to hear about how human centricity is really becoming, a thing that we listen to more and more. CEMEX, in the same way, we focus on people, on the planet, definitely, purpose and profit, of course. We cannot forget about that because we actually create jobs and job opportunities for many around the world. So our strategy, in the same way that Leanne is mentioning, is people-centric. We have been for years developing listening mechanisms for our customers, for our own people within CEMEX, with our communities. We have an amazing process that allows us to understand their needs and how we can serve them better. And I truly believe that this approach, this human-centric approach, has taken hold of the company, and we are really looking to solving for the issues that we all face, as part of, as citizens of the world. As cities grow and there's migration into the cities, we have a very important role to play in shaping the built environment, in making sure that there are services that really reach as in equitable ways, everyone that is part of these communities. We are very interested in seeing how cities develop and how we can be, more than just materials providers and become solution providers, because we really see challenges there in cities. So our strategy, along with our mission, is a little bit broader than just the statement we have. And we are truly committed to making sure that we are part of solving for the challenges of the cities of the future and the people that live in them. So our, I would say, also an acknowledgement of the impact we've had over the years is a very strong motivator towards accelerating our path to decarbonization in particular. And as you say, delivering products that are lower in carbon content and thinking of solutions that can continue to make cement and ready mix viable. It is, essential for the building of cities and resilient infrastructure. So we really need to find a way to continue delivering on our promise to our customers of being there for all of their construction needs, but in better, more sustainable ways.
Thanks, Beatriz. I just wanted to echo a note that the SVI partners just put in our chat, which is that we are going to be taking Q&A later in the hour, and we really do encourage all of our viewers and listeners to drop questions there, and we'll get to as many as we can towards the end of the hour. I wanted to dig into some more of the details of this intersection between climate policy and I should say between climate action and social impact, knowing that that's such a priority for both of your companies. As we alluded to earlier, often in many companies, even when these are integrated strategically, you're talking about separate strategies and separate teams learning to work together. Integrating the two areas can obviously become somewhat complicated. And the bigger the company, of course, the more complicated the challenge becomes. So I'd like to ask some questions about sort of the process of integrating the goals. First of all, was there a time earlier at your company when these issues were handled somewhat more separately, somewhat more siloed? And what was the process like of trying to bring them together? I think I'll start with Leanne on this one, only because I think I can only imagine, given Nestlé's huge reach, how many silos there are to break down.
Yes, indeed. I don't think I'll be telling anyone anything new that when you work for a big multinational, there tends to be silos that arise and exist. Sure. And I believe that this climate change, our ambition to a generation regenerative and advancing regenerative food systems at scale, and our human rights journey have really shown the value of bringing those silos together. I think it's rather unfortunate that that's the mix that's pushing us to do this, but it's great that we're able now to leverage the competencies, the skill sets, and the approaches from the different angles. So it's only in the last couple of years that we've been able to really bring those into a more holistic approach from a management and structure perspective. Mm-hmm. We did have different parts of the organization working on different issues at different times. Which was working, but now with the urgency that we see, and we really want to be, a leader in this space, we've recognized that holistic approach and bringing those silos together is what is needed.
Were there some specific pardon me for interrupting, but I'm wondering, were there some specific structural changes, for example, involved? Can you tell us a little bit more about those?
Yeah, sure. That's I was going to share next that. So it really started. We have created a board level committee, the Sustainability Committee, which has the oversight of how we're managing not only climate change, but our entire roadmap, which includes plastics and packaging, water, responsible sourcing, but also human rights, diversity, inclusion, well-being of our employees. So coming together at a committee level of the board. Then at the executive board level, of course, the entire executive board is very focused on these issues, but for purposes of decisions and recommendations and guidance to the rest of the organization, we have a committee called the ESG and Sustainability Council, which is made up of the majority of the executive board members, which really then provides the guidance on implementing and decision-making to get these things happening, because at the end of the day, the programs happen on the ground around the world.
Sure.
And we need an organization and a system to enable us to make those informed, holistic decisions. So, board level, executive level, and then working groups that have fallen out or come out of those organizations to help bring these things together. And then we also have something we call the Human Rights Committee. It's not a decision-making fora, but it is precisely for the reasons you just described, an opportunity and a forum to break down silos. So everyone who works on different aspects of human rights within our vast organization can send a representative to our bi-monthly workshops to exchange ideas, to ensure best practices across commodities, across business lines, across geographies, to really leverage our collective insight and knowledge on these items.
And it sounds like that seems like making a clearer and quicker communication channel from the top level to some of the stakeholders seems like a key part of that, a real kind of vertical integration of it. Well, it's not quite the right way to use that term, but a kind of an easier bringing together of the multiple stakeholders.
Yeah, absolutely.
Was there sort of has there been sort of a recent aha moment where you sort of saw the benefits of all those things being united in that way?
Well, some of the programs that we are implementing are really touching on multiple fronts, and we see now the power of that integration and the lack of silos. So our Income Accelerator program is something we launched in January. It's working with cocoa farmers in Côte d'Ivoire, and the original impetus was to address child labor risk. And to do that, we looked at the root causes, which in many cases, it's poverty. So living income. So how do we help the farmers with their living income? And we structured a program that incentivizes the farmers, not on quantity, but on quality and activities. So they get an incentive to send their children to school. They get an incentive to adopt better agricultural practices, such as regenerative practices. They get an incentive to adopt other forms of income, so side streams, and incentives to do some pruning of the trees. And then a bonus, they do all of them. And then we went one step further, and we don't pay the incentive just to the farmer, but also half to the spouse. So trying to promote also diversity and inclusion and empowerment of women of the household, who are oftentimes the ones that are looking after the food, the school, the household, and went further to then create financial educational programs and training for the women in the community so that they can understand better finances. And then we pay this through mobile apps. So there's not cash that can just be taken or what have you. So looking at it from all these different angles, regeneration, D&I, living income, child labor, etc., holistically as a program. And we're very excited about this. We've done a successful pilot of about 1,000 farmers in Côte d'Ivoire in the last couple of years. Our goal is 10,000 now, going for the next couple of years. We hope to then expand that to Ghana and eventually all of our farmers at risk around the world.
Thanks, Leanne. That's great. Beatriz, I wanted to turn some of the same questions onto CEMEX as well. Again, a company, as you say, you've got 110 years of history and probably a lot of, and obviously undergone a lot of change over that time. Did the social impact and climate action functions used to be somewhat siloed? And if so, how has the organization been breaking down those silos?
Yes, so the short answer is yes. We used to work very committed and very intensely, but each of our initiatives independent of each other. A few years back, and I'm not saying 2 years, but maybe 5-8 years back, our social impact, particularly our social impact focus was very anchored, let's say, on our plants and the community's right outside our plants, and solving for their needs. No, so we used to have like around 5,000 different initiatives going on, as we have over 50 plants all around the world, and it was not only a matter of social and environmental not being tied, working together. It was a matter of social being very, very local, as we call it. And since then, social has begun to take a more and more important place in how we think about our business. So it was turned into a strategic function at the corporate level. And that itself brought the whole conversation and social and on our impact on people and the opportunities we had to contribute to creating a more sustainable society, not only a built environment, but society. It became part of the strategic conversation. And then as we began working on it, we realized that we needed systemic solutions. We cannot only focus, internally, we, of course, from an environmental standpoint, focus on improving our process and our products. But as we raise our heads outside of the specific things we need to do inside and think about these solutions we place out there in the market, and for our communities, we need to think systemically, because people don't, care if there's an environmental guy and a social woman here or there. They care about the solution. So we have been working together pretty much in the same way that Leanne describes. We have from our board of directors a sustainability committee that meets quarterly and is constantly reviewing and informing our initiatives. And then our executive committee level, we have all of the functions that have relevance to our future in action strategy. That's what we call our environmental commitments, are present there. So we have production, we have research and development, innovation, customers, or our customer experience area, and of course, sustainability. And within our sustainability model, we include all of our ESG topics. Even the guys in compliance are on board, and the issue of human rights, becomes something more and more relevant for everyone. For every industry. So we definitely have a strong focus on that. So that happens at the highest levels of the organization. And then in more of the development of day-to-day strategies and initiatives, we are working very closely. We still, have environmental reporting into production and kind of more of the technical side, whereas social is closer to public affairs and is resides in a different executive vice presidency. But I would say that we have monthly meetings where we are constantly checking in with each other to see if our strategies are, as I said, systemic and addressing and bringing in all of these solutions. Our focus is, as I've said, on developing solutions for livable housing. We're working together on water. We're working together on waste management and circularity. So it is a very organic conversation, even though from a structure and organizational structure standpoint, we are not reporting into the same vice presidency.
Sure. You both talked about roles at the executive level or at the board level in kind of coordinating and integrating these efforts. How has the role of your CEO changed as this work has come to be more integrated? Obviously, the tone is always set from the top, but compared to say 5 years ago, 10 years ago at CEMEX, how might the CEO's role look different?
Yeah. Well, I have to say that Fernando has always been very passionate about our transformation initiatives, because we actually see our Future in Action strategy as a company-wide transformation in how we think, what we learn about, and how we operate the company and what we deliver to our customers and our communities. So he has always been very passionate about transformation projects, but what I've seen in this one is he is I mean, he has a whole new level of energy and commitment and presence on the topic. He spent over 40 hours of learning on, the technical side of climate change, and he brought on board that learning. And I don't know if it happens in other companies, but for us, sometimes dedicating time to learning, we need to pull people or push people into it. So dedicating, of our most senior level executives 40 hours a year to learn about climate change, and with that common base of learning, then develop solutions and alternatives on how we could address and accelerate our path to net zero. Fernando has been right there from day one. He is very vocal. He's continuously advocating for a green economy inside of the company. Very present in all of our training. We've trained over 5,000 people on the principles, let's say, or the basics of climate change and how we can participate. He's always there, opening, closing, answering questions. He holds frequent town halls, and he has also become very active outside of CEMEX. He just spent a week at COP. He's very excited about the First Movers Coalition. I really see in him a commitment and an energy towards this topic that is very special, I would say, in how he, you can see his personal commitment to this issue very clearly. So,
and a CEO is always going to be the face of the company.
Oh, absolutely.
From an outside perspective, that's going to send such a strong message, of course. And and Leanne, having published a couple of things from Nestlé CEOs about environmental commitment, I know that statement's been out there. But what about the inward-facing role? How does that work for the CEO at Nestlé?
Yes, so I would start by saying creating shared value has really been a core tenet of Nestlé for a long time, much longer than the more recent activity. So it's something we've always been focused on. Likewise, human rights. But in the past, as we talked about silos, we would address issues in more focused areas as opposed to more holistic and systematically. But in the last couple of years, we have really been raising our game on that. And Mark Schneider, as our current CEO, is very clear on our direction. He wants us to be a leader in climate change and GHG reductions. In the way that not only in terms of our targets, but in terms of really the regenerative food systems at scale and how we can leverage our size and scale to deliver that and bring others along with us, working collectively through advocacy and really being a leader in this space. So internally, he is also vocal about that. He's very clear on his expectations in terms of our roadmap and delivery on our commitments. And so it resonates inside just as it does exterior, and really it's great. It's great to have that vision and also be putting ourselves out there as leaders under his leadership.
Thanks. I'm wondering, again, two large companies with very extensive operations. What are some ways with organizations of this scale to be able to kind of, or what's effective at your companies when it comes to affirming that these goals are part of the culture and reminding the whole organization that it matters. I mean, obviously the CEO's words matter, but what are some other steps that you're finding to be effective? Free skate for who wants to answer.
I can start with that if it's okay with you,
Sure.
Leanne.
Sure. Yes.
So you need a multi-level approach, no? So it cannot be all talking and motivation and inspiration. You also need the structural elements there. So for us, learning has been a very important piece of it, and we are not only making sure that our people inside of CEMEX understand what our objectives are and how fast we want to get there and what their individual contribution can be to this path to the green economy. We're also doing the same with our customers and our supply chain. So we really believe that we need to bring everyone on board. So learning, I would say, is very important. As Leanne has been saying previously, of course, to ensure a just transition, but also to accelerate the path. We cannot do this alone. We have worked also on our incentives. Incentives have been very important, and our, compensation goals include an element of reaching our carbon decarbonizing goals. For all of the leaders in the company, whether you are the one right there or you are, two steps behind, we all have a decarbonizing or a future in action objective. We are working also very hard on advocacy, and I've mentioned this before. So outside of the company, working with governments, communities, community leaders in particular, and academia becomes very, very important, particularly in a company that still has, or has a very technical component to it, and innovation and research and having the right talent available are the levers we need to accelerate our path. So we are looking again not at this challenge as an ecosystem challenge and as an issue that needs us to continue reinforcing through different aspects. So
Sure.
we are doing that, and we are working very hard also with and I do need to mention this, the HR team has been crucial in this effort, because they hold a lot of the people levers, who they hire, how we compensate, how we train. So they've been doing an amazing job in making this happen.
That's a great point about the people element. And Leanne, I actually had a follow-up question that kind of came off that people question. And if you don't mind, Leanne, I'd like to pose it to you, because I think it echoes on some things that came up earlier. But someone in the audience is asking, when you're talking about the importance of a just transition, especially for sectors that are not necessarily hugely energy intensive, how much does that involve understanding how a low carbon economy has an impact on work and labor and skills, not just the immediate needs of the company, but the broader things that for example, a farmer or someone on the food supply chain is going to need to understand that weren't part of the skill set, say 20 years ago.
Yeah, no, it's an important part, and one needs to really think about not only the direct consequences of whatever program activity, but the indirect consequences or the follow-on ones, so that you don't create additional ones. If I can give an deforestation is one of our commitments. We deforestation in our primary products. And we missed our goal by just a few percentage. And why did we miss it? The reason we missed it is because we didn't want to leave the small farm holders behind. It would have been easy to get rid of them and just go with the big farm holders because they have the systems in place, are able to do that. But what about the small farm holders? So we need to be conscious that our decisions in trying to reach our low carbon economy don't leave people behind, or in any of our, climate or other related commitments and programs, and then help those that may not have the same resources, education, support to come along as well.
Sure.
And that's just one example. Another example in our field would be farmers that have cows. Cows are another source of greenhouse gas emissions.
Methane.
So what do? Do you just only use large farms that have 100,000 head and with all the systems to capture all of this, or do you work with the small farmers, which is what we're doing, to look at manure management?
Sure.
and soil health, and how you can, increase production, reduce emissions. So it's important, exactly to the question, and to just transition, not to jump to what might be the quick and faster solution without thinking about, okay, what does that mean for those that are currently engaged in perhaps a higher carbon economy?
And that, of course, echoes the larger climate justice debate that we saw at COP about, what obligations do more advanced economies have to help bring along and aid that transition in countries with fewer resources and that haven't had as many technological advances benefits yet. That's such a great point. I have another question from the audience that has to do with the intersection between climate and public health. Obviously, climate problems have public health impacts. And one of our audience members asked, can the panelists reflect on their company's thinking on any initiatives you might have related to the climate change impact on health? Beatriz, this made me think, of course, of the city's aspect of CEMEX and of all the issues with waste and clean water. But do you want to take the lead on that one?
Yes, and it's interesting as we think of our efforts on adaptation and resilience. We are considering well-being and health and safety, mostly not specific health issues, but actually the safety of our communities as we've seen climate disaster and the severity of climate disasters and frequency grow. So we are extending, we have a very solid internal practice on health and safety and operational continuity that of course considers our people being, our people's well-being, and from a physical and also from a mental standpoint. So what we are doing is extending our capabilities to our communities, to the communities where we operate. We are working very close with our health and safety leaders and with our enterprise risk management leaders so that we can make sure that we are there with the right level of support. We have, of course, partners from or external partners and NGOs that help us deliver some of the services that we are providing our communities. This is an initiative that we have piloted this year, and we just want to make sure that people navigate through disaster and are more resilient in coming out of that. That is at this point the extent of our work on health, let's say, issues, and safety issues.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But still integrated considerably. Leanne, how about Nestlé?
Well, I'll perhaps give an example of one thing we do on a particular sector, whether or not you would call it a public health initiative. I'll leave that up to the audience, but one area that we are focused on is, of course, sustainable packaging and reducing our use of plastics, both virgin and reducing overall. And one of the programs we have is working actually with waste pickers. So this is an informal job sector, typically in developing countries, where we have some programs to support these informal waste pickers that collect recyclable plastic. We set up a program to remunerate them, get them healthcare and some basic services and conditions that they would not otherwise have. And we're working to try and benefit from their labor, but in a respectful manner that gives them dignity, looks after their health, and contributes to the community.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's really interesting. I think we have time for one more question from the audience, and I find this one interesting. It really kind of has to do with metrics of performance. We have an audience member who asks, in the United States and perhaps internationally, the cost of natural resources are essentially taken for granted and not factored in to the overall consumption and expenses of an organization's balance sheet calculus. So this reader's question is, how is social value integrated with economic value at your companies? What kind of metrics do you use to try to capture a more holistic representation of the performance of your organizations? This is a challenge we're all grappling with, but I'd love to hear how it's playing out at your own companies. Leanne, how does that playing out at Nestlé?
Well, we don't have one metric overall that can reduce everything we do to a value. We use different metrics in different areas to try and measure that. So, for example, we have a youth, Nestlé Needs Youth program, where we're trying to match a need in terms of employment needs from a huge sector of youth across the world, with opportunities that we know are needed for a resilient future. For example, we have an agripreneurship program where we're trying to bring young people into farming, but on a where they can earn a good livelihood and be resilient for the future. So then we track how many farmers we've trained. So we've trained over 40,000 farmers so far in our Farmer Connect program. We'll look at how many people benefit from the various programs, such as the Income Accelerator one I mentioned earlier, where our current target is 10,000, and we're looking at ultimately at 160,000 farmholds around the world. Mm-hmm. So it's more program by program or activity by activity, as opposed to a net social impact value. Mm-hmm. If someone has a way to do that, I think that would be very interesting.
And they will be very much in demand very quickly.
Yes.
Beatriz, how about for CEMEX? What are some metrics that are useful in trying to figure out that true value of what you're doing?
Absolutely. So I will probably just echo Leanne. We don't have like an NPS, for social impact. We are looking into trying to find a way, to better measure the perception of the cities where we operate about the company. But we are following up on our initiatives. We have a very important one here in Monterrey, in Mexico, where we are headquartered. When we embarked in our digital transformation, we realized that the city didn't have the talent or the development programs there to service an emerging digital economy. And this was not only meant for CEMEX. I mean, we realized this was a problem overall. So we joined with other industrial leaders in building what we call the Monterrey Digital Hub. That is a place that fosters innovation. We have space for rent for entrepreneurs at low cost, and they can rent different size spaces. We have learning programs for them, and we make sure that we have events and build a community. So this is an innovation center, and we sponsor. We just recently sponsored a group of people in partnership with the government to come in and learn to code. And that, from an upward mobility standpoint, it's very easy to measure, because they come in with no jobs, literally no jobs and no skill, and they leave the program, a 10-week boot camp, with a job that pays $70,000 to $80,000 a year. So we are measuring upward mobility. We are measuring the people that go through our training programs. We are measuring the number of jobs that we have available for them and the quality of them. So we are looking into these type of metrics for each of our flagship initiatives, and of course the ones that are still being developed at the local level with the immediate communities outside of our plans.
Thank you, Beatriz. This has been such a fantastic conversation. Unfortunately, we've reached the end of our time, but I want to thank you both, Beatriz and Leanne. Thank you so much. We've all learned so much from what you shared, and I hope it's going to start many more productive conversations down the line. With that, I want to thank you both and pass the microphone back to Bobby Sultan. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt, and thank you, Leanne and Beatriz. Really informative session, really inspiring, and I hope our audience got a lot of value out of this. It was great hearing about two very different industries and the things that you're doing, some of the things you have in common, and then some of the things you're doing differently. So just want to say thank you again for being here. We need more examples like this, as the private sector, as I said early on, is going to play a critical role in climate change and making sure we have just transitions, that we protect people from the negative impacts of climate change, and to make sure that no one is left behind. I also just want to wish both Nestlé and CEMEX continued progress, learning, and success as you take your important efforts forward. And Matt, always a delight to partner with you and Fortune. Your company's commitment at the intersection of business and society is really to be applauded. So thank you so much to you and to Leanne and Beatriz for being here. I also just want to give a shout out to the Shared Value Initiative crew that is working behind the scenes, not only on this session, but the entire series. And I just want to thank Georgie Eckert, Geale Gershon and Emily Mosler for all of their work throughout this full speaker series. And thank you to all of you in our audience for joining us today and for being a part of the Shared Value Initiative community. Keep making progress on your purpose-driven efforts. The world certainly needs you. So thank you everyone for joining us, and happy year end to all.